The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus said to his disciples, "To you who hear I say, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. To the person who strikes you on one cheek, offer the other one as well. And from the person who takes your cloak, do not withhold even your tunic. Give to everyone who asks of you. And from the one who takes what is yours, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. For if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do the same. If you lend money to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners and get back the same amount. But rather, love your enemies and do good to them, and lend expecting nothing back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, for He Himself is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Stop judging, and you will not be judged. Stop condemning, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and gifts will be given you. Good measure, packed together, shaken down, and overflowing, and will be poured into your lap. For the measure with which you measure will in return be measured out to you." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Good morning. Several years ago, a fairly famous man was en route to a location on the grounds of his residence when an attempt was made on his life. A gunman shot the man, and he was struck twice, once in the abdomen and once on his arm. The man was quickly rushed to the hospital, and despite massive blood loss, he survived. But almost as quickly as the events happened, the man urged everyone to pray for and forgive his would-be assassin. The shooter was sentenced to life in prison, but the victim visited him shortly thereafter, and in an unseen twist, the two of them emerged as friends. If this story sounds familiar, it's because it is the story of the attempt on St. John Paul II's life back in 1981. He was crossing St. Peter's Square when he was shot. And the Pope made a request for clemency for the shooter. And then finally in 2000, the man was released from Italian prison, but was deported to his native land to serve out a different sentence. While in prison, he converted to Christianity, and 4 years later, when he was released, he came to Rome and laid flowers at St. John Paul II's tomb. This wonderful and true story came to my mind after prayer and reflection on our readings from this weekend. And just to recap, our first reading had David face to face with his enemy, King Saul. David had the opportunity to vanquish his enemy, to end this endless pursuit of David's life. But he acted in justice and mercy, and he spared King Saul. Then St. Paul told us about a heavenly image in which we are all created, and we know that to be the image and likeness of God. And then in the Gospel, Jesus lists several practices that were direct, countercultural, and in most cases difficult, but not impossible for humans to do. So in light of this, what is the Lord saying to all of us this weekend? Well, I think the Lord is inviting us to consider how important it is to grant mercy, love, and forgiveness to others. And there are some points to consider on this note. Firstly, there's something fascinating about how David handles Saul. Yes, he spared his life, but David referred to Saul as the Lord's anointed. Saul was chosen king in the Old Testament out of many, many people. The Lord chose him specifically, and he was anointed as the first king of Israel. And so David recognized him as one set aside, one sacred, one who could not be slain without punishment. But Saul, out of jealousy and fear of David, because David was also chosen by the Lord to succeed Saul, Saul had been pursuing David to kill him, though David had done absolutely nothing wrong. Despite the fact, David's goal was not to return bad for bad. He desired to show mercy, because mercy speaks to the inner core of our hearts. He recognized Saul as sacred, despite the poor choices that Saul made in his life. And the respect of that dignity and sanctity of Saul is very much godly. I was talking with someone recently, and this particular individual was expressing deep frustration with someone else in their life. And the one I was talking to referred to that other person at least 20 times with the word wicked. Wicked, over and over. At one point, the person asked if I believed in wicked people. And my response was this: language is always very important, because the words we choose have a tendency to set our temperament. I believe that everyone on this earth is created in the image and likeness of God. That's what our church teaches. That's what St. Paul confirmed in our second reading. And therefore, because of this, everyone has within them a fundamental goodness. Just like King Saul, all are set apart. All are chosen by God and created in goodness. If we only focus all the time on pointing out things that are wicked and people that are wicked, we run the risk of being unable to see goodness. If we are all the time looking for the wicked in others, are we ever going to be able to see what is good? We risk developing a blindness. We must be able to distinguish people from their acts. Certainly there are people who have given their lives over so extensively to evil and to evil acts that we might not be able to make that distinction, but we, as Christians, are laden with the challenge to begin with the fundamental goodness and dignity of each and every person, even our enemies. David demonstrated this. His life was in danger. His enemy was before him, and he could have easily ended all of his struggles, but David spared him. In our gospel, Jesus confirms his desire for us to look with kindness and compassion on those who hate us. He points out, too, that we have all done wrong and have been forgiven. So shouldn't we be willing to mete out the same mercy and forgiveness to others? So this is perhaps the point where maybe all of this has caused us to think of people in our lives who we've not forgiven because of some offense. It's also the point where you're up there, where you're thinking, yeah, Father, I hear you. You're up there. You don't get it, though. I've been really hurt by someone. Oh, I get it. Your hurt is very real. I deny that in no way. Pain affects us deeply. Pain and feelings are real. I fully acknowledge that. But what is at the heart of mercy? Love, of course, but also peace. I've said this very often. Holding a grudge is like taking a bit of poison each day and expecting the other person to die. Life doesn't work like that. We're the ones who are harmed on the inside. The other person may not even be aware of the offense and may not be aware of their effect on our lives. We may never receive an apology from them. The illusion is that that person has a hold on us. The reality, though, is that we are often the ones that need to let go. That is within our grasp. We can grant forgiveness and mercy and become free of the burden. When we're able to forgive others, even if they don't request it, we measure with love and mercy. And as the last line of our gospel said, that same measure, love and mercy, will be given unto us. So yes, forgiveness is radical. It's difficult. Offenses are real. In a certain context, this means that somehow UK fans in the room have to figure out a way to come to terms with Duke. Might seem impossible, but we know that with God, nothing is impossible with His grace. Returning to the story of Pope St. John Paul, he was indeed a very holy man, and his life was threatened and almost ended by a senseless act. His response could have been one of vengeance, but at no point was it. His response was to see that the would-be assassin was a beloved child of God, deeply in need of love in his life. John Paul's love brought about that man's conversion and saved his soul. An act of mercy and love on our part could have the very same powerful impact on someone else, but also on us. To err is human, to forgive divine. Can we find it in our hearts, with God's grace, to grant love and mercy to those in our lives who have offended us? Can we find it in our hearts to forgive as we're forgiven?